Okay, for this video, I wanted to tell you about this painting that contains, honestly, one of the funniest conversations in art history. The story of this painting that this person made and got into deep trouble for, and actually was called to court because of what he created and how he defended itself. It's such a hilarious tale. This is Paolo Veronese's, well, we call it Feast in the House of Levi. Let me pull up the presentation here. All right, so this is in chapter 17 of your textbook. This is a work of art that falls in the late Renaissance. And what we're looking at here is a painting. It's oil on canvas. And your book, actually, I've written to the publisher about this. Your textbook misrecords the dimensions of this piece. It is 18 feet tall and 42 feet wide. It's a huge work of art. I mean, think about that. A bus is about 40 feet long. It was done, again, by Paolo Veronese in 1573. And the thing that's really funny about this work of art is that it wasn't always called Feast in the House of Levi. It used to be called The Last Supper. That's its original title. Paolo Veronese was commissioned by a monastery, by a church, to create a Last Supper. And this is what he gave them. And let's compare it to another Last Supper, of course, Leonardo da Vinci's famous fresco that you're probably familiar with. Take a look at the difference there. Obviously, the scale and the medium are different, but if this is supposed to be a Last Supper, like, what's going on? Who are all these people? Biblically speaking, the Last Supper is it's a Passover Seder. It's a feast for Passover. Jesus and his 12 disciples breaking bread together. What's going on here? There's like 30 people in this room. It's hard to even make out who Jesus is, which one he is. Barely intelligible right in the middle of the painting, with a slight halo behind his head. And we can figure out sort of a who's who of other people. This young man here would be John the Apostle. But the rest of these figures, it's a zoo. So I want to show you, this is a nice close-up of the painting. Let me minimize myself. So the setting is not in a small upper room as is described in the Bible. It's this crazy Venetian arcade, and we've got this long table with all of these people just kind of chowing down. Jesus in the middle, St. Peter carving a lamb, but behind them there are people holding plates and goblets. There are waiters here. There's a dog at the foot of the table. What's he doing? A cat underneath it. And we can see that this is a very sort of multi-ethnic scene as well. We have people of color. We have people of different ages. We even have down here, he's like a jester. He's a dwarf dressed as a jester, and he's got a parrot on his wrist. Up here, we've got a guy picking his teeth. People are serving food and pouring wine. It looks like this guy is maybe polishing the balustrade here. We have people in turbans coming down from the rafters. If we look on the other side, we see a portly gentleman. We see more waiters sort of collecting plates and serving food and pouring wine. And over on the side here, we have a couple of gentlemen holding halberds, those sort of combination axe lances. And it looks like this guy has grabbed a plate too. He's got a plate and a cup of wine, and he's sort of walking away from the table. It's like this great big buffet. It looks like fun. This looks like a fun party, but it is not really biblically accurate. It's not really a Last Supper. It's this crazy party. And because Veronese took such artistic liberties with this scene, he got in trouble, big trouble. So he painted it for a monastery, and as far as we know, they were satisfied with it. But he painted this work of art during the Counter-Reformation. This is whenever the Catholic Church is beginning to sort of assert itself as almost like a military force trying to reclaim areas that had started to turn towards Protestantism and sort of turn away from the Church Catholic. And this painting was seen as a criticism of the Catholic Church because it's biblically inaccurate. And Veronese actually got himself basically put on trial. And the trial has been recorded. There are transcripts of it available. And it is so funny because, oh my gosh, Veronese was a real smart ass. He is talking back to the Holy Council big time. And I'm going to post a link to this transcript, but it's hilarious. They're asking him, all right, mister, you know why you're doing here? He's like, well, I guess it has to do with this painting that I made. I was told that I have to change it, and I have some opinions on that subject. And he describes what the painting is, how big it is, and all right, mister, so who are these people? What are they doing here? And he's like, well, these are all servants and entertainers and waiters. They're all just sort of having fun. I am taking poetic license. True, this painting may not be exactly what's described in the Bible, but it's such a big painting, I figured I'd fill it up. And the gentleman over here, Veronese said that they're hired security. They're like bodyguards, some toughs hired by the person whose house this is to sort of, make sure no one comes in and bothers Jesus. But the thing that sort of really got up the tribunal's nose is the fact that they're clearly German. They're wearing German clothes and they're carrying German weapons. Germany was Protestant. They were heretics. And the fact that we have heretics and little people and people of color all sharing food at Jesus's table. This isn't artistic license, according to the tribunal. This is heresy. And they asked him plainly, why did you do this? And he's just sort of saying, what's the big deal? It's a big painting. It's a large painting. It can accommodate a lot of people. And so I thought I'd fill it up. And they're objecting, saying, well, shouldn't you be painting what the Bible says? And sometimes people take this whole story as like the man cracking down on artistic expression. But in a way, I think the Inquisition kind of has a point. This is not really biblically accurate. And the fact that he's sort of citing other examples from art history to defend his artistic license, the fact that I had good intentions. It's a big painting. I wanted to paint the best painting that I could. Sounds good to me. But the Inquisition, they weren't buying it. They were like, all right, smart guy, you can't get away with this. You got to change this painting, mister. All right, dog, nix it. Maybe put in a Mary Magdalene figure instead. Let's see, get rid of the Germans, get rid of the dwarf. Let's see, paint this guy out, the guy who's picking his teeth back here. Get rid of him. Make all these changes. You've got 3 months, and you're not going to get any extra money. You have to make all these changes yourself on your own time and on your own dime. And Veronese's like, all right, fine. You want me to change this painting? I'll change it. And all he did was, over here, he wrote, feast in the house of Levi. And then over here, he wrote, Luke chapter 5. So what he's done is he hasn't changed the painting at all. He just changed the title. This was supposed to be a Last Supper, but he decided to change it to a different biblical story. Luke chapter 5, the feast in Levi's house, Levi was a tax collector, and Jesus dined with tax collectors and fallen people and sinners. And people asked him, Lord, why are you dining with the sinners? And he says, well, it's not healthy people who need a doctor. It's sick people. And he's defending himself for dining with sinners. And actually, I think that's kind of a better fit. That was a really smart choice because these are people who the church would have considered outcasts and heretics. And they've all come together to dine at Jesus's table. That's a very nice sentiment. That's kind of a nice cooperation between the two. And I like the idea that these people who are sinners in the church's eyes are invited to dine and eat the same food as Christ. But it is kind of a shame that his original intention to sort of, well, actually, it's hard to say. Was he deliberately trying to piss off the church? It's possible. Something I didn't point out, this guy here in the red, that would be Judas, the betrayer. And he looks a whole lot like a cardinal, which is to say sort of like a high priest in the Catholic Church. And yikes, the fact that he's wearing that and he's Judas, yeah. Veronese really sort of dodged a bullet on this one. But it's such a hilarious story where legalism butts up against artistic expression. And I really think that this whole incident was an inspiration to one of my favorite Monty Python sketches. The setting is that Michelangelo is painted a Last Supper, and John Cleese, as the Pope, is objecting to all these crazy people, and they spend the first half of the bit describing this painting. And eventually he decides, I know, we'll call it the Last but One Supper. What? Well, there must have been one. If there was a Last Supper, there must have been one before that. So this is the penultimate supper. And it's the same exact choice that Veronese made. You don't like the painting? Okay, cool. Let's just change the title. And that's what it's been called ever since. Paolo Veronese's Feast in the House of Levi. Yeah. Again, it's one of my favorite stories from art history, and I'm glad that I could share it with you. So thank you for listening.